It's Halloween, but not as you know it. Event 3, the old jail and the magician's oubliette.
The prison, the hospital bed, and the castle dungeon, all places designed to enact separation, a divide between you and the world outside. The sick, the cursed, the dying, and the dangerous all seek an audience with you this evening. A dark and brooding anguish seeps through the cold stone of these cramped and dingy cells. Centuries of grime and filth and suffering of humans, some guilty of such terrible crimes we shed no tear for their pain. Yet many of those incarcerated in the prisons and dungeons of old were not so deserving of their fate. The battle-worn and beleaguered, the heretic and the hag, those who loved and those whose only misdemeanour was being born at all. A stain on society merely for existing. Beaten, bloody and cast aside, awaiting transportation to strange and faraway worlds, simply for a loaf of bread, a pair of shoes, some broth for their starving child. What torment they have known, a life so grisly in endeavour and lack of calm, chained by the sting of cold metal that cares not for the flesh it shreds from bone. How some cry out, yearning for release from their agony, while others, stoic and silent, simply stare through the darkness with piercing eyes. As you step into their domain, your comfortable condition is stripped from you as their clothing was to rags, their loathing of your privilege but shards of glass to your senses. Even now, though they are long dead and forgotten, their shapes and shadows can still be seen if you squint hard enough through the gloom. A cough from across the chamber sets your nerves ablaze with activity, electricity coursing through you as your brain searches for answers. Suddenly, hyper-aware of your solitude and vulnerability, the clink of metal on stone, a distant moan, and then the sound of breath, wheezing and corrupted by the phlegm of disease and deterioration. A breath that not only sounds close, too close, as that of one intimate and invasive, but also hot upon your cheek and so putrid as to make you retch. Welcome to your confinement, your sentence, your punishment. Here you are forgotten, alone, and trapped, with but the ghosts to keep you alert. And the sound of footsteps approaching is not the rhythmic thud of impending release or redemption, but the tread of horrors yet to come. and those of even darker intent. Oh my goodness, Linda, look at this place. Bricks and bars are obviously nouveau chic round here.
And vines growing on everything.
I'm sure I went to a nightclub in the 1980s that looked like this place.
Oh,
Didn't stay very long.
that wasn't my scene.
No, yours was much darker.
Correct.
Oh my goodness, I can't wait to explore around here. It's this is very intriguing. And prisons are particularly active and offer a whole repository of experiences when you go on a paranormal event to explore prisons. I mean, they're quite remarkable places, particularly the old disused prisons, the derelict prisons, because there's so much of humanity's pain and suffering,
Right.
and also those little moments of joy and hope that just permeate these particular buildings. For me, I just love exploring places like this. The extraordinary thing when we think about prisons can take all sorts of forms. You know, we can talk about places like a prison or a jail. We could talk about relationships being imprisoning. We can talk about habits being imprisoning, trauma. There's so much in our lives that could be seen as a prison. Even things that relate to health and how a dis-ease or an illness can become a prison, where it stops people from living the life that they want to be. And as such, places such as old infirmaries, asylums, hospitals,
Yes. Yes.
could even be seen as prisons or jails, where there is an equal plethora of experience to be had of this sense of incarceration and loneliness and isolation, even though there are no doors or cells as there are in prisons.
Right.
Have you ever had an experience of a place such as this, be it a prison or a hospital or alike?
Yes, Martyn. I have a little story to share. Growing up, I often heard stories told by my uncle about Zamorano Hospital. He was well acquainted with it since he was a tuberculosis patient during the early 1940s. He told me the sanatorium was built in the early 1900s to provide a healthy fresh air treatment plan on the shores of Wallam Lake for those afflicted with tuberculosis. My uncle was cured from the disease because he was fortunate to be at the stage where antibiotics came to the scene and brought the disease under control. Zamorano has many times had its healthcare purpose redefined through the years, but my thoughts always go back to the days prior to when antibiotics had a dramatic impact on the dreaded tuberculosis. Years upon years of when those with the disease were sent to the sanatorium to remove them from the general population, removing them to keep others safe. What kind of impact did this have on these poor individuals? Knowing they were isolated and alone, knowing this was their last place to live and eventually die. Today it's known as one of the most haunted places in Rhode Island. Perhaps it's easy to let your mind get carried away, for the place is formidable in its appearance, maybe a little intimidating in its size of brick and mortar standing the test of time, housing the emotions of those who endured agony and cried out. Many feel the suffering of those in the past, and even up until today, where the hospital is now caring for those who can't care or advocate for themselves due to physical or cognitive capacity, is actually imprinting all of that within its very walls. When we visit places like Zamorano, I think it's advised to go with respect. We all can let our own fears and definitions of what we think may be residing within take hold of us. Yes, although the history of the place may certainly contain horrors, it also contains amazing stories of people and their successes. So beware. What you may encounter is not the haunting of the place, but rather your own haunting within.
So when we think of prisons and places of incarceration, we immediately head towards claustrophobic, frightening, dangerous spaces of stone and brick and concrete. We imagine bars on windows and shackles and other instruments of confinement. Yet the most terrifying jails are those within us, the thoughts, emotions, and behavioral patterns that keep us locked away from the extraordinary life. We are captured and restrained within traumas and beliefs and other forms of narrative that tell us we are not enough, because people don't need prison cells made of stone and metal to take their freedom from them. People are quite capable of building their own means of incarceration within them. And whilst prisons are claustrophobic, frightening, dangerous spaces, they are also mundane and saturated by that low-level cumulative stress that stems from the mundane. It's there, clawing and gnawing away at us, paralyzing us between the everyday we feel obliged to fit into and the everyday of wonder and aspiration. I think this idea of the internal prisons and how we navigate that in terms of the world around us is really important when it comes to exploring ourselves and understanding ourselves better.
I think we've become very conditioned to put things on the back burner or to disregard what pains we may be feeling. And I'm not talking just physical, but the emotional and mental, spiritual for that matter.
Mm.
We tend to ignore our inner voice that is crying to be liberated.
And it's very profound when you explore the world and travel through the world, how we imprison ourselves and stop ourselves from living that full life in the same way as an inmate is incarcerated in those cells. So when we go towards the paranormal experience and we find ourselves in an old disused jail, such as the one we're in now, Linda, there is this sense of these poor people who were incarcerated and had terrible, terrible conditions, inhuman conditions inflicted upon them. And we know that because we know the history. We sense it in every brick and every stone. It pours out at us in this saturated air of misery and suffering and pain. And yet we all experience that without the need to have a building. Literally words, ideas, beliefs, the teachings that we've grown up with, other people in the world have put us into a position where we take all of those things and we create our own prison with them.
Right. We think of the physical locations of jails, and you're right, we feel it. You can feel it just ooze this feeling of being abandoned or so isolated, alone with no comforts. And how often we are freely walking and can experience those same sensations because of what we've been told, because of what we've been impressed upon as this is just how it is. And so, you just need to suck it up and keep on moving when in fact we're just carrying this burden that we don't need. The cell door is open and we can just walk out.
Absolutely, yeah.
That really amazes me that we are all capable of doing this. We all do it, never mind capable of doing it. Every single person does it. You think that everything's fine, that you're doing all the right things, right or wrong aspects, which cloud your mind in and of itself.
Yes.
But then all of a sudden you get hit with the reality of like, oh, things aren't good. What do you do?
Yeah.
What, and you do feel imprisoned at that point. Like you think, "Oh, how do I get out of this? What I thought I was doing everything right. Why is it now that what I see, all my choices have led me to this point, and it's not really where I want to be. How do I get out of this?"
Yeah.
And with one therapy, there's so many aspects of the training that helps us individually be able to recognize that we have the key and we can just step out.
Yes.
Not necessarily always easily, but definitely available.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's a matter of being diligent in your efforts and taking responsibility and accountability for your actions moving forward.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're going to get dumped right back into the jail.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
who wants that? There's
Automatically.
that phrase again.
Yes. I often think back to the loneliness of familiar spaces. And in my lifetime and my life experiences, these places that hold loneliness and isolation for me. And in so many ways, the elements of one therapy really did blast off the doors of those isolated places for me. and created within me this sense of wanting to reach out to the other isolated spaces in the world, all those people in all of those lonely bedrooms just wishing that there was someone who could offer some sense of comfort within a little nugget of wisdom or a little piece of knowledge that they could give, a little bit of care or compassion.
Yeah.
And the idea of reaching out into the world, into the darkness, into all of those lonely places, and just letting people know that they're not alone and there are others in the world who feel and think and experience the world as they do, or that they are accepted and not judged. I think that's so important.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh yeah, because those places, those lonely, isolated environments that seem so comfortable on the surface, they have this veneer of being warm, comforting places when actually they are symbolic of the loneliness that a child or an adult alike may
Yeah.
feel.
Right.
It's really important to recognize that how those places become those little prisons within that we experience. So we go back to that childhood bedroom where we felt alone, or we go back to that busy street in a city where we were standing there and all these people were around us, but we still felt alone. We go back to that relationship that was abusive. And in that space, in that environment where that abuse took place, we find ourselves back there, even though we've traveled thousands of miles in space and time from that place. And recognizing that prisons and incarceration can take many forms, the drive and the want to reach out into those spaces and literally break down those doors and cast open those windows so that people can see the world beyond is so important for all of us to take
Right.
on
Like,
as a
definitely all of us.
responsibility. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I'm listening to you talk about those out there, so to speak. I think of the One Therapy community and how it's an opportunity for everyone to gather in a place where we are accepted for who we are.
Mhm.
So many of us have been labeled as different our entire life, and we learn to cope by simply saying it doesn't matter.
Mhm.
It's okay if if I don't have anyone else that's like me. I'll manage. We have these weird coping mechanisms that come into play. And to your point, it creates a prison, because we accept our what we think are our limits.
Yes.
I'm not like everyone else, so therefore I need to adapt and adjust and manage based on my little world. And keeping us safe in that comfortable little world works for a while until we realize it's limiting us.
Mhm.
And
Sure.
again, this makes me think of the community and how it's really exciting. Not that we're all alike, but because we're all different,
Mhm.
that it makes it so wonderful because we can partake in something, whether it's socially or interactively or through our learning and studying or practitionership. We actually continue to keep those jail doors unlocked because someone else will step forward and show a reflection of ourselves that we didn't recognize before, that we can choose how to address that reflection of ourselves in a way that helps us continue to grow.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of commitment and it takes a lot of desire to continue to keep that door open,
Yes.
because each one of us can very easily get right back in lockdown.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so easy. There is this real sense in terms of otherness that everybody is other. No one person is exactly like anybody else. We're all unique. And the challenge with this normality, or this sense of normality that we aspire to in the world, is it is essentially an illusion. Some people are very good at hiding aspects of themselves, dissecting them, amputating them off of themselves, or suppressing them so that they can pass as the illusion of normality, that they fit in, that they reap the rewards of comfort from fitting in. And those people very often polarize against the other, push it away, say it's bad or evil, or these
Right, right.
people are whatever descriptive term you want to put in there. The
Yep, yep.
challenge
Or
is,
label. Yep.
absolutely, the challenge is, of course, is that all the while they're pushing people away for being other, they are not really feeling the normality within themselves. And very often it is that bit that they've suppressed, amputated, disconnected from,
Yes.
that's there, devastated and alone, isolated in its own prison, that's trying to get the attention. And the more they rail against that part, the more they take that hatred of that part of themselves, that utter disgust, and then put it out into the world and inflict pain and suffering upon those who represent this thing within themselves.
Right.
And so there is no normality. It is an illusion.
I chuckled a few years back, the phrase normal is so overrated. I used to really cling to that. Um, because I thought this is so true. What is normal? Who dictates what normal is? Why should there be a set parameter of what normal is?
Another interesting element of this is in that sense of the normality and the normative communities, how when otherness is celebrated, either within a community or within an individual, and people are elevated and inspired because of their uniqueness and because of their otherness, that is then somehow seen as a threat to the normative, because suddenly all the people who are working so hard at being normal are resentful of the fact that
Yes,
others get to celebrate their uniqueness. And that is a prison as well. It isolates normative
absolutely.
communities. Yeah.
It's a sad state to be in. The fact that so many people have become comfortable with more of the stance of criticism and criticizing someone's actions, whatever they may be, lifestyles, behavior, whatever, rather than celebrating their successes or celebrating their uniqueness. That's sad. That is a very sad, isolated way to view life. It's
Devastating.
not something to say, oh yes, I do that and I'm very proud of that. And we all have experienced or witnessed the threat that you're speaking of. Even if you are not the person involved that's accomplished something or is boldly professing whatever, you commend them for that. You actually get turned upon by those that feel threatened
Yeah.
because of their normal definition of what they think is right. It is truly being locked down in a jail
Yeah.
when you have that mindset.
Yeah.
How limiting your thought process is.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. There is this real embedded sense within the dynamic that goes on in these relationships between different communities, the communities of other and the communities of normative society, that people feel personally attacked, that their human rights are being attacked as there is a move towards equality, diversity, dignity.
Mm.
And actually, it's not the person that's being attacked, it's the ideal, the
Yes.
normativity that is being torn down. And this is where my heart breaks for people who defend their right to normal lives.
Yeah.
So, the air bunnies again, those air
Yeah.
bunnies, they just pop along, pop up. There is this real sense of disgust and horror and just being treated so badly by people who feel their rights are being eroded. But actually, what's going on is that the ideal of normality, of normative culture, is being taken down so that everybody can celebrate their uniqueness.
Right.
The veil can be taken away, and we can
Right.
all be living in a world where we are not judged for being ourselves and for being who we were born to be.
Right.
That, to me, is freedom. It's the release from the jail.
Oh, absolute, absolute liberation.
Yeah,
No question, no question. I mean, even the people that think, their standards of normalcy are being threatened, it just makes me wonder, have they ever considered that perhaps they're keeping themselves limited by not seeing what else is out there? Why wouldn't we want to get poked
yeah,
to say, hey, look over here. What about this?
yeah,
And then choose. If it doesn't fit, that's fine, but don't discard it for someone else. Don't discount it for someone else. If it's them and it's what they love and it's how they thrive,
yeah. It's
who
yours.
who wouldn't want to thrive more? That's what this is saying to me. Like, well, just keep
Yes.
yourself limited. Keep
Yeah,
yourself limited because these are the ideals that have been generationally passed down to me and I'm keeping them.
yeah.
Well, that's great if they serve you well, but do they really?
It's comfortable and it's what I know, so I'm going to stick with it rather than daring to throw open that door and do something different. And in so many ways, freedom has been tied in over centuries with the ideal of normative society. So this is the norm, this is the aspiration within our society, and you are free when you fully embody that and live your life to that.
You're free when you're told when you do what you're told to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Which is another social dynamic, and it's a
Yeah,
dynamic of government, which is I know what you want, and I am going to talk about what you want, and I'm going to tie it in absolutely with what I want, so that
right,
when you move forward to do what you want to do, and what to achieve what you want to achieve in life, what you're actually doing is fulfilling what I want you to do. And it's a
right.
terrible, terribly pernicious dynamic on all levels and all stratas of society, from government through to relationships,
Mm.
how people control each other using this. That's what you want. To get what you want, you have to do what I want.
Which is why I like being the other.
Yes. Yeah. It gives you a sense of outsidedness. Is that a word? Outsidedness? Of being the
Um,
outsider.
we can make up
We can
words.
make up
We can
words. Yeah,
make up
we
words.
so often do. Just throw these syllables together, see what word we come up with.
We can pull it off.
Yeah, absolutely. But that sense of the outsider is also the observer.
Right.
And the observer is usually the one who has a greater sense of what's going on. The observed just do what they do whilst they are being observed, but it's not until you become the observer that you get the whole picture. And so, very often, the
Right. Right.
outsider, the other, the fully authentic and engaged with their otherness other, they are the observers of all the other stuff that's going on. And they can
Right.
literally pinpoint all of the problems and where those problems stem from. And in many ways, they can see the solution, but they also know that it's a solution which is of the other and will never be accepted in the mainstream. And that is quite a polarizing and heartbreaking thing to feel as the other, to know the answer, to see how things can be different, and yet also knowing at the same time they'll never really embrace this.
Right.
And until such time as there is a tipping point and a paradigm shift in society, and then they get it. Worse still is the magician's oubliette, a place inside where a person forgets their magic, their own sense of wonderment and marvel. We are all born to inspire. We are all woven with magic. And I don't mean sleight of hand, smoke and mirrors, or even the phantasmagorical. I mean magic in as in the spectacle of life, cells dividing, life polarizing into reality, growing, learning, being in the world. I mean the things we do not yet understand and perhaps can never understand, as this would be an act of undoing the observer and the observed, separated by a perspective that means one can never be the other, even when that one is one and the same. The mystery of life for us is wrapped up in the experiences that can never be contained by definition, words, or ideology alone. Neither religion or science or skepticism or dogma and doctrine can fully appreciate the mystery without unlocking the mystery and therefore making it something else, something that's not a mystery. Reiki, for example. If you believe Reiki is pseudoscience, then you'll have oublietted yourself into knowing Reiki is a pseudoscience. So if you know Reiki is a pseudoscience, then you're not talking about Reiki. If you believe Reiki is universal energy, then you are not looking upon Reiki. Reiki is something that each of us has the ability to experience. As to what it is something.
Right.
This is why I prefer personally the translation of Reiki as the mysterious atmosphere. It is a feeling, a sensation, an affectation. But what it is, I'd rather feel it, sense it, be affected by it than to know the prison by which I limit it. and am therefore imprisoned by that knowing. The magic within you, only you can feel, sense, and be affected by. You cannot know it completely. And any attempt to lock yourself into specificity is just that, being locked in. Over time, we are locked in by ourselves, by others, by circumstance so many times we forget the magic was there in the first place. And this is the magician's oubliette. So never forget, you are woven with magic. And if you don't feel that way, you simply need to escape to a place of remembrance.
That's really lovely. When we try to comprehend the wonder of Reiki and the force that it is all around us, always, when we try to comprehend it, we potentially limit our experience. So many times we're told, you can't just go with your gut. You can't just go with your intuition. You can't just go with your feeling, when in fact, for me, those are most of the times when I feel the most empowered, the most alive, and when I can release myself from the limits of definition. That's not to say that, definition has no purpose, because obviously it does. But when we allow definition to really hold us in place, that's when we experience limitation.
The idea of definition is really interesting and important because we use definition to communicate our experiences from one person to another. And one of the physiological reactions that's very commonly experienced within Reiki modalities and other modalities of energy therapy is this sense of vibrational tingling within one's hands. And lots of things happen in such a simple thing as a tingle. So many different reactions happen. So many different things can occur. I often see people questioning it, looking at it, going, oh my goodness, and having a shock because they're really experiencing something. And it's disbelief, and it's like, oh, I shouldn't be feeling that. Why am I feeling that? All the while knowing that that was the experience that was said would happen. And then there are others who say, well, I'm not feeling tingling, I'm feeling heat, or I'm feeling cold, or I'm feeling this. And literally taking the communication of you may feel Reiki as a tingle, a very limited phrase to
Right,
give some semblance of a clue as to what it may be and
right,
how they might experience it, what to search for. That's taken and it's locked down in as much as, oh, I'm feeling heat or I'm feeling cold, because there is a counter. There's like, this is what you said I would experience, I'm experiencing something else. What we don't really see, tingle, hot, cold, anything else of the plethora of experiences that you can have, is people just letting go the definition. The tingle got them there to recognize something.
right,
Once you got there, let it go and just live that experience. Don't even try to define it as a tingle or a heat or cold, because when you just let it go and you really experience it, when you let it immerse you and saturate every fiber of your being, you'll realize that it actually isn't the thing you were going to describe it as, but you didn't
yeah,
limit yourself or put yourself in that box to
right,
actually define it. You just let
right,
it be what it was for you.
right. I mean, like everything else, our individual body will react to triggers in the best way that the brain can get its wrap its head around what the experience is. And then, to your point, letting it go, say, okay, I got your attention. Now now let's have a look see.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that's when the fun begins.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And we do that with everything.
Yes,
It's not just Reiki. There's just so much that we do this with, where we lock it down and we define it so rigidly, and eventually there are so many locks we find ourselves in the oubliette, in the magician's
Yes,
oubliette.
we get stuck. Again, we're doing everything we should be doing. And perhaps it served you well, but no longer. And you have to release yourself. You have to let go of those definitions, whatever form they may be coming to you in. Let go of them so that you can experience more. It's not even experience something different, it's to experience more. Because if we think of definition to a point where it limits us, you don't care what the other is. You just want more. You want something different. And that's liberating. That's another form of liberation.
Yeah, absolutely. And even when we talk about PsyQ and the experience of developing one's own psychic intelligence to be able to experience and sense and feel the world very differently to most, there is this habit or response that people very often have when they experience something. They shut it down immediately.
Right.
So there is this connective experience to the world around, but as soon as that gives some sort of feedback, close it down. Fear, trepidation, pensiveness, worry, whatever that emotion may be, it literally closes the connection down, because people really want to experience that. They want that amazing knowledge and life experience of actually having that thing. But when it comes and when it seems very, very real, they will close down from it. And again, that is that oubliette nature,
Yes.
the belief that that's what we deserve in life, that we've forgotten our magic to such an extent that when we experience that magic, we shut down from it almost automatically.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not one for the term protection. In fact, if you were to ask any PsyQ-based medium about my biggest bugbear, it would probably be the word protection. For reasons that will be revealed in due course, I rarely use the word, favouring the term assertion as a much healthier option. However, if there were one location that I could be persuaded to require protection against, it would be St Breville's Castle in Gloucestershire. Affectionately known as St Bees, the castle is now used as a youth hostel, and, having stayed there on many occasions, I can assure you it's well worth a visit. From the sinister oubliette and dark shadowy grounds, to the many rooms that now act as dormitories, the castle is one of the most active centres for paranormal activity that I know of. Nevertheless, the reasons for needing protection are not really anything to do with the castle itself, more to do what seems to happen whenever I visit it. On one of my first overnight events at St Bees, I'd been conducting a vigil in one of the dormitories and was feeling a little frustrated, having been calling to the darkness for almost an hour. The thing was, not only were my cries of, "Is anybody there?" failing to provoke any response from the dead, the living were hardly effervescent with their interaction either. It is a common misconception that spending a night in a haunted house is all creaks and moans, objects flying into one's face and spectral presences that scare the willies out of the poor, unsuspecting visitor. On most organised events, it's more a question of tummy grumbles and yawns that break the silence, which was one of the motivating factors for me when I chose to reinvent the typical event into a psych-Q extravaganza. Towards the end of the vigil, I decided it was time to retreat for an early coffee break, so I asked the group if they were ready to end the vigil, and still there was no response. At this point I began to wonder if they'd A, fallen asleep, B, left the room really quietly as a joke, leaving me to talk to myself for an hour, if only they knew that was a regular occurrence for me, or C, some deathly quiet phantom had done them all in one by one. I decided it must be option A, so, after a final "Is anybody there?" more in the manner of a personal joke than anything else, I called into the all-pervading void that I was about to put my torch on. There was a sudden shuffling sound as I flicked on the torch to reveal a room full of people, all sitting upright and alert. Tough crowd. I clambered to my feet and ushered the still, unusually silent group from the room. As I watched them pass, I became more and more certain something had happened, something I was completely unaware of. We made our way down to the base camp, and people served themselves hot drinks before scurrying off to various corners of the room. By now I was of the mind that either this group was exceptionally quiet or something very strange was occurring. Soon we were joined by the remaining attendees who had been conducting a vigil in another part of the castle. They seemed much more upbeat and rambunctious than my group, who, like little lost statues, remained quiet. As the groups mingled and began to chat amongst themselves, I ventured into the corridor to arrange for some biscuits, when I realised one of the men from my group was following me. I stopped and waited for him, as his demeanour suggested that he wanted to speak with me in private. "Hello there," I chirped as he approached. "Can I help?" It was at this point I noticed him grasping his video camera, and my heart sank. You see, I would go out of my way for anybody if they needed me to. I've been known to invest vast periods of time helping people conquer their challenges, offering help and support as best I can. However, when it comes to dust and the photography of said subject matter, I have very little time. Certainly, on the standard paranormal investigations, there were 3 pieces of invaluable technology that many people felt the need to spend most of their time fixated upon. The first 2 were often supplied to the group, and these were EMF meters that often squeaked and squealed like a Moog synthesizer, and the other was a thermometer which shot a laser onto the ceiling, wall, object or person that you wanted to know the temperature of. 30 people equipped with laser beams and portable sound effects can often share an uncanny resemblance to a bad 1980s pop video than a paranormal event. The final piece of essential technology for many people is the camera, which personally I don't mind the video cameras. It's digital cameras with flashes that I'm not fond of. This is mainly due to the fact that when a digital camera touches a person's hand, they lose all cerebral capacity to understand the simple statement, "Please can you warn us before taking a picture, because flashing in the dark is not pleasant, particularly when it's full on in the face." But honestly, there are only so many times you can look at an artistically snapped dust particle, either drifting or streaking, or using its sophisticated stealth abilities to transform itself into a face, a hooded monk, or a bushy aspidistra with small occasional table, and say, "Ooh, what a fascinating picture of dust." I'm not sure what that is, dust. Maybe it's something dust, but it could be a dust particle. It's dust. There, I said it. But you know, it's tough when somebody looks so happy with themselves because they took a picture with a spectral cat poo in it. It's really challenging to purposefully darken their satisfied glow. Anyway, back to the fellow chasing me with his camera. Resisting the temptation to curl my lip and go cross-eyed, as is my wont when the camera is pointed in my direction, I waited patiently to be shown the puppy rampant with artistically positioned stickle bricks, dust. What I was shown shocked and embarrassed me in ways I have never been shocked and embarrassed before and since. Not dust. The curious silence that pervaded my previous vigil was retrospectively shattered by the sound of a penny plummeting. The thought that I had just spent an hour calling, "Is anybody there?" to a room full of people who were busy watching two of the group make a wildlife programme on one of the dormitory beds was not something that happens every day. I mean, I certainly wouldn't get all amorous when there are people with night vision technology about, despite my innate sense of mischief and a rather naughty streak. "I just thought you should know," the gentleman proffered in an attempt to remove the gaping death maw I was aiming towards his camera. Forcing my jaw shut, I managed to thank him on the way up before standing there for several minutes contemplating such questions as, did they respond in some way when I asked if anyone was there? And should I go back to the room and make the bed? Eventually I decided the most positive slant I could place on this rather hideous incident was that you certainly do get more bumping and banging in the night for your money on an event with me. I have not used this rather tasteful slogan as a marketing strategy as of yet, but watch this space. The important thing to mention here that this was not the end of the night's humiliation. Oh no. Having slipped into the repetitive cycle of habitual double entendre whenever around the group from the vigil, I then proceeded to have a 20-minute discussion with a clicking radiator. During this conversation I established that the radiator was male, named George, and born in the 1850s. I was not able to ascertain how he felt about the sudden swath of laser beams that descended upon him from multitudinous points of origin. Now, I'm not exactly sure whether any of these events had a karmic connection to the highlight of the night, whether St. Bees just wanted a laugh at my expense, or if I just know how to throw one heck of a good party. But for some reason, this particular investigation was about to get even more interesting. Over the years, I've collected a vast range of hilarious poses that I have seen people contort when frightened. These usually consist of wide-eyed and wonderful, tonsils, and the rather curious ability to be petrified to the spot in all areas except the arms, which usually flay about maniacally. Always an infinite source of amusement for me, I have compiled a top 10 of favourite poses, which I often demonstrate when teaching. What I usually fail to mention is, firstly, that I use the top 10 as a way of embarrassing people into not being frightened, and secondly, it's usually me hiding round the corner that causes the terror in the first place. Well, how else do you think I get a close-up view of these contortions? A medium's got to get his kick somehow. Anyway, my personal favourites are the Wallace and Gromit, the Tyrannosaurus Rex, the Feed Me the Giant Chocolate Button Now, and finally, the When I Grip My Teeth I Pee Myself. Should you ever see me on the street or at some salubrious occasion, remember that I do requests, so please feel free to come over and ask me to demonstrate my current top 10. I'm very pleased to state that I do not have a top 10 poses for what happened next on the event. In fact, there is only one pose that a person gets the split second before they are about to use the contents of their stomach as a projectile in your direction. It's rather like the Hunchback of Notre Dame meets high-powered sprinkler system without the spinning but retaining the dodgy eye thing. Now, if ever you want to witness a rather large gentleman doing the Highland fling, there are two things you can do. You can visit the Highland Games, or you can upchuck in my direction. The two are fairly similar in resulting aesthetic, except in my version there's usually more Kate Bush, flapping arms and girly screaming, and less sporran, which some might say is a blessing, because knowing me, I'd probably make a complementary therapy out of it. The interesting point is that I always thought when somebody projectile vomited in the movies that the fact that it was green was simply hyperbole. Yet I can state from experience that on many occasions it is actually green and is remarkably close to the shade of pea soup, believe it or not. I say on many occasions because this was not the only time I gazed into the eyes of Quasimodo, which sounds like a euphemism but is actually a rather accurate description. There were many events at St Bees where people vomited, usually around the same area. And before you say it, no, I did not spend all night, every night, frog marching the group around that particular area to see what would happen. We had tea breaks. Think of this as a map of a beautiful landscape. Your beliefs, behaviours and overall way of living is the map, and the landscape is this one life you are living. The map can keep us safe, protect us, ensure we get where we're going, death. The map can even show us the way forward, the next step, the path to what we desire. Yet the map also keeps us locked into a single narrative, path or journey.
Right.
It's only when we come away from the path, when we stop mimicking those who came before us or those who surround us, just doing what they do, we begin exploring, pioneering, originating the unconditional life. We live free and beyond the shackles that once bound us to the predestined fate. We may get lost at times and have to take responsibility for ourselves and our relationships with others. Yet as we forge a new and unique journey, we become leaders, we become visionaries, and we become unfettered and unchained. As we ink a new map of our own path and our own terrain, the ink bleeds with empathy, with benevolence and with compassion. Because you cannot take that path with all its dead ends and false hopes and frightened, confused, where the fudge am I moments, and not feel a deep and lasting sense of connection with all those who walk that path after you and all those who walk their own path as you have done, only to have encountered their own freakishly complex and horrifying what the fudge moments. I fancy fudge now. Do you fancy fudge, Linda?
Well, you know the answer to that.
I
You
don't
can
know.
have mine.
It's yeah, so not fudge either.
Yeah, no. No, 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 no.
No, no, no. What about chocolate covered fudge?
Ugh. Maybe panucci.
Okay. This
Do
is
you
a
know what that is?
no.
Oh, it's peanut. It's peanut butter fudge.
Oh, well, that sounds
That's
nice.
quite delicious. Of course, you have a sugar high that lasts about a week, but um, yeah, no, Panucci fudge is quite, I don't know, maybe that's a New England, US thing. It's quite delicious.
Oh.
But beware of the high sugar content. Like, I'm not kidding you. Someone will have to peel you off the ceiling.
Yeah, me and sugar, or too much sugar, should I say? Yeah, probably not a good thing.
Yeah,
Bad
me
enough
either.
when I'm
Me
not on
either.
it.
Yeah, yeah, it would be a very bad thing. It's kind of the equivalent, think of, we've talked about this in the past, maple sugar. Maple sugar.
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Panucci has the same sweetness content as maple sugar.
Oh, right, okay, yeah, so just a little bit then.
I would imagine there's probably a maple Panucci fudge,
Ooh,
which is to die for.
ooh,
Um, yeah.
ooh.
Yeah, so you can have all the chocolate fudge you want. Yeah.
Maybe we should head back to the tavern and you could have some concoction and I'll have a fudge cocktail or something.
We should head back. I think it's time. I need a drink.
I think I'll invent a cocktail which is flavored with fudge and peanut butter and maple sugar.
That sounds like something you'd like.
Definitely, yes. I'll call it a cluster fudge.
Oh, that's perfect.
That so often happens when I walk into a room. It's a complete cluster fudge.
That's usually my phrase that I use. Not quite,
But you have a
not quite the same
yeah,
variation.
not
I have a
quite the
little,
same. Yeah.
little more of a harsher twist to mine.
Yes, I know. You use a slightly different word.
I use a very descriptive word.
Yes. Yes, yeah. The word fudge stays the same. It's the cluster bit that
Yeah.
well,
Uh,
let's head off to the tavern. It's been lovely here. I say lovely. It's been a spectrum of experiences and emotions here at the jail, but it has been incredibly insightful, I feel.
yes, well, just because something has the appearance of being negative, we really do need to seize every opportunity to be able to see what it reflects at us, of
Absolutely.
us,
Yeah.
so that we can shift our perspective and have a different viewpoint, perhaps. What we've been told all our life is, and what really is
Yes.
when we look within.
We think about this sense of desire for fun and pleasure and excitement. And very often that's what inspires people in these sorts of environments, as well as fear and terror and
Yeah,
uncontrolled screaming. But really, a sense of solemnity is also very insightful and very powerful in terms of the transformation it creates to respectfully explore the idea of how we lock ourselves in,
yeah,
be it internally within ourselves, emotionally, physically, spiritually, psychologically, or whether it be a place like this of incarceration.
right.
It is extraordinary how the nuance of emotion and experience and feeling really do enable us to have an experience that isn't so as extreme as pleasure or fear, but is even more transformative in the results it creates.
Something so different than what you expect.
Yes, yeah, definitely. And it sets us free to go off to the tavern and have a cluster fudge.
You can have your cluster fudge.
What are you going to have?
I don't know. I'll let Cornelia whip something up, and she knows absolutely no chocolate.
Unless you really, really need it.
No, I think we're too good of friends that she wouldn't do that to me.
I'm sure whatever it is that you have will be wonderful.
Absolutely. I have no doubt. She's never disappointed me yet.
Well, let's head off to the tavern, and until next time when we meet for our fourth and final event. Ooh,
I can't wait.
exciting. As always, be enchanted.
This podcast is freely available, and we are delighted that you find it intriguing and valuable enough to journey with us to this point. When you are ready to experience the Power of One therapy, its tools, techniques and perspectives for yourself, visit the Realm of Romanos. Go to www.one-therapy.com and start your adventure today.